Don's death. They didn't have the courtesy or the courage after July 29th to reach out to Don's mom.
Objection. Misstatement and outside the record.
Sustained.
They didn't have the courtesy or courage to reach out to Miss K.
Objection. Misstatement, as the court is aware.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you will recall the evidence. Please proceed.
Mr. Trask told you that you heard from the people in the house through the alarm who knew AJ best. After that, they know AJ best. They know Josh best. But they never, ever, ever talked with them.
Objection. Misstatement. Defense counsel is well aware.
All right, sustained. Please proceed.
You got to ask yourself why. Why? Instead of hiring an expert at $500 an hour to interpret what Keith Whiteley said in medical records about Josh having symptoms prior to the murders, instead of having one of their investigators that are sitting here today go talk to him and say, Mr. Whiteley, here's the record. What did you mean by that? Tell us more about that. Tell us about Josh. No. They had an expert paid $500 an hour to tell you Mr. Whiteley didn't mean what he said. Mr. Whiteley didn't mean what he said. He called it some hindsight syndrome. He was transferring what happened back to the past. That's called evidence shaping. It's called evidence shaping. They have to stuff the evidence that's not favorable to them, that shows that AJ is not guilty. They have to mold it and shape it and put it into their theory. Why not just go talk to Keith and ask him what it meant? You'll see that repeatedly throughout this case. He's right there. You can talk to him anytime they want. AJ, let's start at the end of the state's case. And I want to tell you something about lawyers. When we prepare a case, and it's probably more important for them because they're accusing someone of a crime, when they look at evidence, they support it, they sponsor it. And before they get ready to present the evidence in court and they prepare for the case, they have to look at that evidence and say, does this really mean what it says? Are we confident that this evidence is credible? Because we're accusing this young man capital murder. So Mr. Jordan and Mr. Trask made a decision, looking at the sticker and the specs behind there, that it was credible. They stood up here just a little while ago arguing. That's blood. It's from Antonio Sr. And they knew everything that we knew that we presented to you coming into this case. So you can judge that decision to sponsor, this bag is killing me. You can judge that decision to sponsor that evidence with all the other evidence in this case. And let's get into it. Miss Rossi, Chris told you, right before trial, all of a sudden discovers blood under the name tag. In 7 years, there's not been one person, anyone who was with him, near him, by him, who said there's blood. We also know there's no blood on the shirt, under the tag. There's no stain there. She tells you, and they brought the big bed in here, and she knows, based on previous testimony, that she can't say that it's backsplatter from the shooter because he was 1.5 feet away to 2 feet away. They know that. They know that if they say that, I'm going to attack her and say, there's another witness changing her story. So they have to figure out how to get those blood specks on that sticker, because they know there's never been any blood. And let me stop there for a second. And let me remind you what Mr. Jordan said in his opening statement. I suspect you're going to hear arguments about where this evidence came from and cross-contamination. And if you don't believe that evidence, it's okay. Just believe the other evidence. That tells you from the very beginning that they really didn't believe that evidence. They conceded it before it even came in because they knew everything that we're going to talk about in the boxes. That is reckless. It is the reckless introduction of evidence in a capital murder case where a young man can go to prison for the rest of his life.
Objection to misstatement of the law.
All right.
Parole after
You will receive and remember the evidence. Please receive.
Parole after 40 years. It's desperate. It's desperate. He told you at the very beginning, we're not sure what happened here, and you don't really have to consider it if you don't want to.
Objection. Misstatement of the opening statement, Judge.
All right. And remember what the lawyers say is not evidence.
We can call,
Please proceed.
sorry, Judge. We can call it the Hail Mary pass. The last minute pass, got to figure out how to get it. Prosecutor's job is to seek justice, not to win. Their job is to seek justice, not to win. It's dangerous because that's how innocent people get convicted. It's dangerous to not believe or be sure that that evidence is accurate. Rossi comes in. We can't testify about the blast spider. The bed's laid out. They say senior is expiration. They came up with that story. She says the blood's coming out of his mouth. Remember this? It gets even worse. She said the blood coming out of Antonio Sr.'s mouth was drying in midair. Heard of such a thing? From 1.5 feet away, the blood that's being expired is dry. I think I used it once many times as a sign. Is drying in midair. Does that make any sense to you? So she's testifying because she knows she has to figure out how do we get the specks on the sticker without there being a corresponding blood stain. So we're going to come up with this theory. It's raining specks. It's raining flecks. The whole deal about the shooter coming around to the side of the bed is pure speculation. But we'll take that. It's raining flecks. Dry blood. And that speck, or those two specks, have to remain on the shirt for 5 to 6 hours without falling off. And they have to remain on the shirt in the exact spot where the sticker's put on. That's what they had you believe. Now we get cross-examination of Miss Rossi. And you learn that me and my investigator, Mr. Willis, went down to the lab. To the property room. And we pulled the pillows out of the box. The pillows. And we pulled the pillows out of the box, and what did we see at the bottom of that box? Specks of blood. Not to mention, there's a glove in there. Whose glove is that? Where did it come from? Is there blood on it? Is there DNA? Is there any biological evidence? This glove is just randomly in the box. There's paper. There's plastic. But we do know. Show those are the specs, please. There's specks in the box. Big specks. Rough specks. Round specks. Just like the round speck that Miss Rossi says, no, that's not from that. It came from blood. And you saw it play out in this court over and over and over again. Evidence being taken out. put in boxes and carried over each other. And we saw flecks in the bottom of the boxes just in the courtroom. Saw that twice. It's continuing to shed. And I asked Miss Rossi, is the history of the evidence important to you? She's the most renowned expert, according to them, in this field. And she says no. She says no. The most renowned expert, according to them, says the history of the evidence is not important. She can't say it because it goes against their theory. And it's molding and shaping evidence. Now, further on across, I'm like, Miss Rossi, in those squirts of blood, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of droplets. Yes, sir. And in those squirts of blood, there's going to be wet blood and, according to you, dry blood. Yes, sir. That blood's going to be all kinds of shapes and sizes. Small, atomical, big, large, whatever. Yes, sir. And I brought her back to her experiment. The sugar. Put it okay. And she did that experiment where she got the sugar. She blew it. Look at all the blood on that shirt. She said, the sugar in that packet represents blood. It's the same consistency or whatever she said. Look at that shirt. There's hundreds of thousands of pieces of particles of blood on that shirt. Everywhere. I asked her. The shooter had the cell phone in the gun. Would it be on there? Yeah. We tried to demonstrate that with Miss Carpenter. There should be blood everywhere. It's not. There's not. That doesn't make sense. It gets even worse. It gets even more unbelievable. In a previous hearing, Mr. Blizzard, fine gentleman, came in, and we showed y'all that he handled the evidence. No gloves, bloody pillow. No gloves, bloody pillow. Y'all saw that, right? And you see Mr. Blizzard handling the shirt right, right by the sticker. Saw that? Remember that? Well, I'm not here to tell you that Mr. Blizzard contaminated the blood. I think they're confused about that. We're here to tell you that the history of the evidence does matter. And you get to see over 7 years what's happened to that evidence. It's just part of it. It's just a moment in time of that evidence. Evidence that they sponsored. The evidence that they stood before you and said is a smoking gun in this case. It gets even worse after that. Rossi says that there's a possibility that one of the specs is from cross-contamination. Notice how she won't say cross-contamination. She's well-trained. Transfer. If she says cross-contamination, that supports our theory, and they can't do that. They're even molding the words that they use in front of you. Now, how dangerous is that? How dangerous is that? If we didn't bring this evidence to you, would they have? It's just like Nola in the cage. It's an open and shut case until you hear the other side. She says one of those specs could be from cross-contamination. That is reasonable doubt all day long in that evidence. That is reasonable doubt all day long in that evidence. They conceded an opening that it probably wasn't what it is, and she's now saying it could be cross-contamination. So every piece of evidence in this case needs to be looked at because they're sponsoring. It's desperate. It's reckless. And it's how innocent people get convicted. And I said it gets worse. Rossi said the reason I know that second spec is not cross-contamination because the sticker was sealed by where it was and its shape. So maybe, wherever she said, that first speck that could be cross-contamination, it could have got under there because it was open. But the rest of it was sealed. I think it's on the top. And we look at Mr. Blizzard in trial talking about the shirt. And look at the sticker. How many years ago is that? How many years ago is that? They knew about this, but they still presented it to you. Reckless, desperate, dangerous. Rossi told you that when she got that part of the sticker, it was sealed. We can't prove to you exactly where it was cross-contaminated, but the circumstances are right for it. It played out in front of you. So as you judge the evidence that they talk to you about, it includes the alarm records, it includes the medical records. What else is out there? That cross-contamination is enough for reasonable doubt to acquit this young man. That is enough. And I didn't think
Objection to a misstatement of the law regarding beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, sustain.
And I didn't think they would come up here and argue it like they did. But they wholeheartedly believe in it. And they want you to buy it too. But you now know the truth because we showed it to you. And if we're not here defending this young man against overwhelming odds about the specs in the box, you would never know. Let's move on. Ms. Carpenter, I need you for a second. I'm going to have Ms. Carpenter lay on her side the way that Dawn was found in the bed. This is Rossi again. There's no evidence from anyone, think about it, that Dawn ever moved. None. I was very careful when I listened to what they had to say. There's no evidence that she ever moved, that she was moved, meaning her head in the position of the shots.
Objection to statement of the evidence.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, you will recall the evidence when you begin deliberating. Please proceed.
Dawn Armstrong had 2 wounds in her head, but there was 3 entries. There was one in the head, there was one in the earlobe that went into her head. If you look at the autopsy report, the angle of the shot was like this. That's the only way that it could go through her ear and go into her head. Remember Rossi talked about cartilage and how it doesn't bleed? The angle of that shot is like this. And you'll see the photos when you go back and deliver it. Now, Rossi's stance tells us that based on my expertise, I'm the best expert there is in the whole wide world. This is the angle of the shot. Remember I stood up here with Ms. Carpenter? Remember that? When we talked about that? I didn't ask the ultimate question because I wanted to do it now. There's no way this makes any sense. This would maybe hit her ear or maybe hit the back of her head. But in order for Ms. Rossi's theory to be true, it's called the magic bullet. Anyone a JFK fan? Conspiracy? You know about the magic bullet. That bullet would have to go this way, it'd have to go up, it'd have to make a turn, and it'd have to come back down. It'd have to go this way, it would have to come back up, it would have to turn, and it would have to come back down. Again, they sponsored that testimony. Thank you, JL. They sponsored that testimony. How long did they go over her credentials? It's the most I've ever seen. She's the greatest, she's the best. That's dead wrong. It's not even close. And the reason she has to do that is because if the shooter's on top like this, there's going to be more of a chance of backslap. Could be another example. reasonable doubt. We never told you AJ was a perfect kid. I'm not here to tell you that. I told you that in opening. He's not a perfect kid. Miss K, who they've called her a liar, Miss K, Antonio's mom. They've called her a liar because they're so desperate they can't fit what she says into their theory. So she must be lying. I'll always defend you, Miss K.
Objection to an improper argument, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Miss K told you he wasn't a perfect kid. He was like my Antonio Sr. He lied about the car. He lied about his girlfriend. He lied about where we ate dinner. Yes. He's 16. Is that? I mean, it's a 16-year-old. He created, I don't even know how to explain it. He created his own response on an iPad regarding the Blake Fertitta issue. Oh my God. Oh my God, lock him up. He was trying to impress his girlfriend. He was trying to show her that he was tough. And he confronted Fertitta about the stuff about oral sex. If he was really violent, he would have gone over to his house and fought him. The reason they're bringing all that to you is because they don't have any motive. They don't have to prove a motive, but they know that you're going to want to have an idea of why. There's no motive. Let's talk about desperation. It doesn't get any more desperate than this. When Miss K was asked about a life insurance policy. Wow. Wow. No evidence of that. They didn't bring any evidence of it. They just threw it out there. They're trying to shape and mold evidence to fit their theory. Why would they ask about a life insurance policy in the heat of a cross if they weren't desperate? And it's reckless. And it's dangerous, because that's how innocent people get convicted. Think about that as you go through all this evidence. Gunshot residue. A lot of stuff about it, okay? But I want to point these things out to you. Nothing on his hands. We said this over and over. Nothing anywhere on AJ, right? No gunshot residue anywhere on AJ. His hands, his feet, his clothes, anywhere. Anywhere in his room. They had full control over that scene. And I asked their expert, he says, most .22 caliber bullets don't have antimony. Which ones? I have no idea. Okay. Then what .22 caliber bullets do have antimony? I have no idea. He's trying to argue that the blazer bullets in this case don't have gunshot residue, but he has no idea. How can he even testify to that in front of you? AJ's not going to have gunshot residue because .22s don't have it on them. But which ones do and which ones don't? I have no idea. They're molding evidence. Look at their own report. I'm going to walk up so I can see it. The chemical elements lead, barium, and antimony are components of virtually all primer mixtures except some .22 calibers. That verbiage is the exact opposite of what their expert testified to. That's on their lab reports. Some .22 calibers. They're molding evidence to fit to their theory. Now, we had this big exchange, and I got a little fired up. I apologize with the expert about testing for gunshot residue. Okay, test the bullet. They got an expert for that. They got unlimited resources. Test the blazer bullet. Test the primer. Take the bullet off. For those of you who are familiar with bullets, take the bullet off, pull out the powder, and have the primer tested. And then you can determine if there is or is not antimony in it. Outside of the sticker that we talked about, there's no blood ever been found on AJ, on his clothes, anywhere in his room, anywhere in that house. The DNA report is meaningless. It's meaningless. They're trying to tell you that there's certain percentages of this and that. Again, they're shaping evidence. Courtney Head told you that it doesn't mean much. It's bleh. But they're trying to take that little bit, the little percentages, and hope it confuses you. Again, that's reckless. It's desperate and it's dangerous. There's nothing more dangerous on a DNA report that means nothing to say, look at the percentages, even to exclude Josh. Toilets are, sinks are clean. Yeah. All the sinks in the house are clean. Ask Dagnall or whoever, did you look? And Jimmy James. We'll get to Jimmy James in a minute. Nothing. Nobody washed their hands. No blood. Nothing in the sink. Nothing in the washer and dryer. Had that exchange, that ridiculous exchange with Jimmy James about the washer and dryer. Nothing. No evidence that AJ cleaned anything off of him. The cleaning supplies weren't used. No fingerprints. And see how they argue it the opposite? Just because the fingerprints weren't there, it doesn't mean that he didn't touch anything. Just because there's no DNA there doesn't mean he did. They're never going to concede. If it's there, he's guilty. If he's not there, he's guilty. The evidence speaks for itself. You can't consider the fact that there's no fingerprints, but he could be guilty. They're shaping the evidence the way they want it to be. My favorite witness in the history of my career will forever be Jimmy James. Forever be Jimmy James. I might put a picture of him in my office. And I see you giggling a little bit, but think about this. Jimmy James is out there investigating cases right now. He's actively still investigating cases. It could be one of your loved ones he's investigating. Think about that. Mr. James, one of the most routinely asked questions from a criminal defense lawyer and a prosecutor. Did you talk to the prosecution before you testified today? What did he say? What did he say? I'm not going to answer that. He sat up here under oath in this witness stand. I asked him 3 times, and the 3rd time I got angry. And he looked right at Mr. Trask and Mr. Jordan. Didn't know what to say. And he said 3 times, I'm not going to answer that. I had to get the judge to force the crime scene unit investigator in a capital murder case, in a capital murder case, to get him to answer a question as simple as that. Let's take that a little further. Why did he not want to answer that question? It's almost like he needed a lawyer and took the 5th Amendment.
Objection. Improper argument.
It's the same.
Why did Jimmy James not want to answer that question? Jimmy James, did you talk to the prosecutor about this case? I'm not going to answer it. You get to think about that. And that goes into the credibility of that witness. He was completely unprepared for his testimony. He told you that he did not review his offense report. He didn't even bring it with him. How many questions did I ask Jimmy James? I don't know. Could be. I don't remember. No. Trying to trick me? I don't know. This young man, any person in this courtroom deserves the crime scene unit investigator to be prepared to testify in a case. To tell you guys who are going to determine this person's fate, what happened accurately, intelligently, And consistently, he didn't care. He didn't care enough to read his report or to bring it. Again, they sponsored that witness. Jimmy James is the Amazon of this case. Jimmy James is the Amazon of this case. He collects the evidence and he distributes it. We know from the lady who tested the carpet that she had issues with the way it was packaged. We know that, right? So you get to determine his credibility in collecting the evidence and all the evidence that he collected. Do you want that guy working on cases in Harris County? He's incompetent. I don't say that often in court. He's incompetent and he doesn't care. That's how arrogant they are. Who looks at the evidence? Dagnall, Chabret, Dodson. Do you look at your own evidence? No. Did not know there was an alarm system in the house. No idea until the next day. Didn't test the keypad outside for blood or DNA. Didn't swab the doorknobs. You know all the things he didn't do. I'm not going to repeat them. I think Jimmy James will stick in your mind throughout this trial for a long time. You should have pictured the blood. Now this is important. It's an assumption made by the prosecution. It's an assumption made by everyone out there. But they never proved to you who saw it. The HFD, the Houston Fire Department person, nice guy, but he never personally observed what happened there. No one in front